We will let everyone join. Hey, everyone. Nice to do these things in the daylight for once. It's been dark the last few times. Welcome, everyone. We'll just give everyone a few more seconds. Everyone's coming in, so. I'll do intros for now for the people that are joining anyway. So I'm Laura. Laura and Adam actually are both board members of SAMPS, and David has joined us as well to lend his expertise to our topic today. There's actually, in SAMPS, we mostly do conferences and webinars, and we haven't done conferences in 2 years because of COVID. And we've just now finalized the dates for our conferences, so definitely put them in your diary. So our Glasgow European conference, where we meet up and we chat about things like AI for scientific sales and marketing, or we talk about CRMs or anything to do with scientific sales and marketing. It will be in June, 12th of June this year, in association, well, parallel with ASHG, if anyone's attending there anyway, or if anyone fancies a trip to Glasgow. And if you want more details, make sure you register as a member for SAMPS if you haven't already, because then you'll get the updates and it's free to join as well. And our US conference as well will be parallel to ASCB, so that will happen beginning of December, about the 5th of December in Boston. So more details will come from that, and that's a great way to meet everyone as well and chat about lovely topics like we're going to talk about today, which is how we can use AI in scientific sales and marketing. So people are still joining, but basically what we're going to chat about, there's sort of two halves to this. There's the ChatGPT, among others, which is your language AI. And then there's Midjourney, which is for your images. So you'll notice I posted on LinkedIn a lovely image, but the text was all sort of made up. So you need to have both for it to make some sense. So David is our expert here. He uses Midjourney for our images, and Adam is our ChatGPT expert, and he'll talk about that sort of language aspect of it as well. Hi, guys.
Very good.
Hey, a nice sort of real world experience as well, as David was telling me. He was taking the kids to school and he had to keep them amused while they were sitting in traffic. So he wrote a story using ChatGPT and read it out to the kids about a monster in the woods, which sounds very Gruffalo-y. I don't know if you have that in the US. And then the kids loved it, and then they asked then if they could have an image associated with it. So David was able to create an image then using Midjourney to go with his ChatGPT. And that is just a really nice real world example of what we can do for marketing, for sales, and science as well. So Adam, do you want to sort of do a quick intro in terms of AI in general for anyone that isn't aware already, and then we can get to the meat. And the other thing is, guys, for anyone that's watching, throw in your questions. I mean, really, this is meant to be a very interactive session. We will have access to ChatGPT and Midjourney, so we can start to create images in real time here if you're interested. So keep the questions coming. Another thing I would love to see in the chat is whether you find this exciting or scary. I mean, I personally am finding all of this AI a little scary, but I know probably, well, I shouldn't put words in my mouth. Adam, is it exciting or is it scary?
A little bit of both. A little bit of both, and that's what's so fun about it. So Laura, thanks for kicking off here. That's a great overview. There's a reason that we're talking about AI today. The fact is, this is the hottest topic in the world. Bar none. There is nothing bigger in sales, in marketing, in the professional world. And this is one of those weird things that's actually broken through to Scientific American, to Forbes, the Wall Street Journal, to the New York Times, to Yahoo, to the places where normal folks go and get their information. You can see here just Google Trends, right? AI content is absolutely through the roof, far beyond where it's ever been before. If we look at sales, AI sales is way beyond where it's ever been before. If we look at user bases, this is ChatGPT driving to 100 million users here in just 2 months. You can see a TikTok, a Spotify, even an Uber took dramatically longer than that. The rate of growth and rate of breakthrough, again, to a normal everyday audience is far beyond what we see in recent years, really with anything other than Bitcoin and crypto. Now, of course, that does bring with it a hype curve, right? This is how Gartner likes to describe the hype cycle with new technology. What we have here is where we are. We're at the peak of inflated expectations. I would argue that probably right now, this week, we are at the peak of inflated expectations. There is so much happening. There's so much new in this world, in this tech. Folks are starting to use it again at unprecedented levels. Unfortunately, what that means is for a lot of users, the trough of disillusionment is on its way. So to Laura's point, what we want to do here is start to explain some of this, start to make this real, help folks understand how they can actually use it day to day, a little bit about what it can do, a little bit about what it can't do. I would argue that those two are probably equally important. If we look at the bulls when it comes to ChatGPT, when it comes to AI content generation, right? It's passing business school exams. It's coming for our jobs. It's bringing in 9 figures of funding on a regular basis. Bing has started to take ChatGPT itself, which was really the standard bearer of this new generation of generative AI products, and roll it right into its search rankings and its search responses. You can see on the right-hand side here, it's actually giving a natural language response to a query, which is part of why, and what we'll get into here, this is so exciting. Now, on the other side, when we look at the bears, well, there are errors, there are problems with this tech. There are things it just doesn't get. We are moving things forward, evolutionary, not necessarily revolutionary, depending who you talk to. And of course, the fact issue is going to be a big deal. We'll look at that in a little bit. Again, how it can understand what's in its little box, not necessarily understand what's outside its little box. This is a great example of the fact issue. This is actually from a demo that Google rolled out for Bard, its ChatGPT competitor, its own generative AI. The demo here asked it to give some facts about the James Webb Space Telescope. This one is wrong. It's off by a couple of decades, and it wasn't a telescope. It was an observatory on Earth that actually did that started to give us photos of exoplanets. This cost Google about $100 billion in share value to its parent company, Alphabet. So all of that said, there's a ton of hype, there's a ton of heat around this. What is actually real, though, right? What is going to impact us in our day-to-day and the work that we actually do? We should probably look at what this is first. If we look at Oxford, this is how they're going to define it. I'm not going to sit here and read a dictionary definition to you. Much better definition here, I think. These are robots, right? They're providing human-like execution of repetitive tasks. If you keep this in mind anytime that you're thinking about a Midjourney, about a DALL-E, about a ChatGPT, this is what it's doing. It is taking something that can be done and done over again, and done in a repetitive fashion. And frankly, writing is that way in a lot of ways. Content creation is that way in a lot of ways. All we're doing is stringing words together. And critically, it's adding this human layer. It's making it feel like you're interfacing with a person. It's giving a response that feels like a person is giving it back to you. That's what's so special about this current generation of generative AI tools. That's why they've become so hot, and that's why they're great for everyday work. Because at the end of the day, if I have a task that takes me an hour as a person, and I do it twice, it's going to take me 2 hours. If I do it again, it's 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours, 1 hour at a time. I scale as a human 1 hour at a time. I can get a little bit more efficient. Maybe I get better at the hour-long task. It takes me 50 minutes, takes me 45 minutes. It's still quite a bit of time. I'm still going through my repetitive steps to write an email, to write a blog post, to come up with a list of ideas, to create images. The promise of this current generation of generative AI technology is that rather than spending that hour doing the task and doing the next task in an hour, I spend that hour building a robot. I tell that robot what to do. I give it the steps and I give it the training set to understand what to work in, right? Here is what you're writing about. These are the parameters to use. That robot can scale effectively infinitely. It doesn't take any more of my time to have that run the number of tasks it's going to run. It's never going to ask me for a raise. It's never going to ask for time off. It's never going to need to sleep. It's a robot. That means I can go and do something else entirely with that hour. So making it real, we promised ChatGPT. ChatGPT is very simple to use. This is really what has made it stand out beyond the backend, beyond the amount of data that went into it, beyond just the heat it's getting in the business world. The fact is, you go to openai.com, you create an account, and you get a screen that looks like this. This little guy at the bottom here is where you put what's called your prompt. You literally ask it for what you want it to give back. The beauty of ChatGPT is that you interface with it just like a human being. If you use Slack, it is really no different for you as a person than slacking the person in the next office over and asking them to, in this case, write an email to someone who registered for a webinar about oligonucleotide synthesis best practices. Right?
So Adam, sorry, in
Yep.
terms of signing up, I mean, there's obviously a free version, and now I know there's a pro version for $20. What's the difference? Like for the guys that are messing around, they would just do the free version for now.
The free version for the vast majority of users is sufficient.
Okay.
The biggest thing is speed and performance and uptime. There are a lot of times, for instance, we're not showing it live right now because in the middle of the day, US time, it does get hammered. Any given minute, it might be up, it might not be. The pro version, you will have guaranteed uptime. So if you baked it into an application or you baked it into a workflow where you need the response right now, definitely that $20 a month is well worth it. Typically, though, if you're doing 1, 2, maybe 10 things a day, it's really no big deal.
If you're writing a blog, it doesn't really matter if you can't do it that per second. Okay.
Yeah, at the time being, the responses that you're getting back are basically the same. There's certainly technical differences between the two, but it's not a huge deal.
Yeah. And if you want to be sophisticated, you mentioned Slack there, but you can integrate it in Slack. I know my husband has it on WhatsApp, for example, so he just WhatsApps ChatGPT, but again, it does have downtime issues at the moment.
Yeah, and there's a lot we can get into there, certainly not in an hour, but the availability of the API is fantastic. Frankly, you can plug it into anything using Zapier, which is a huge advantage over the previous generation of AI tools.
Cool, okay.
So in this case, what we did yesterday is we gave it this prompt in that exact screen I just showed you. What we got back was this. This is a largely serviceable, seemingly human written email. If we think about this at a big picture level, it's pretty close to miraculous. I gave a robot one sentence with no context, and it spit something out that is mostly usable. And as you get deeper into this conversation, as you get deeper into those tools, mostly usable really is the North Star. The fact of the matter is, I wouldn't send this email out verbatim, and you should almost never be sending ChatGPT written content out verbatim. The reason being, number one, these tools can't actually understand context or emotion in the way that you do. It's never going to be able to truly personalize something the way a human can. And as you can tell from this text on screen, it doesn't really know what it's talking about. If you read this closely, what it's doing is repeating back to me what I said. It's making some pretty nice connections, right? The fact of the matter is it understood that this is a scientific topic, right? It was able to get that far. I'd say this is 60, 70, maybe 80% of the way there. And that's typically what you're going to get with ChatGPT. The same goes for any other prompt that you give it, whether it's to write a blog post or give you a list of ideas, or even write rudimentary code for yourself. For a scientific audience and for a scientific use case, this is about what you can expect. Now, again, 80% of the way there means that this email that might have taken me 10 minutes to write, maybe it's going to take me 2 minutes to write. That's a huge savings and a huge bit of efficiency. But we should all be very careful to understand that this is not perfect, especially in a scientific context. It's never going to be perfect. There are tools that are promising more context and better results with scientific content, BioGPT is just out on GitHub
Interesting.
this week.
So they are making it more specific to the scientific. So that might be something that we should look into generally.
Yeah.
Interesting.
BioGPT is actually trained exclusively on PubMed articles. So that's going to be one step further, but still this concept of 80% there always needs a human is going to be, I believe, the norm for the foreseeable future.
So obviously ChatGPT is the sort of the main one, but then you've got BioGPT, which is trained in PubMed. I mean, what's stopping, Thermo Fisher taking and training it on all of the Thermo stuff and then making it amazing on theirs? I mean, could everyone then do a specific model that they train it on and it would make it much more accurate?
Absolutely. So ChatGPT will, in a sense, remember your conversations. It will be able to understand and tweak and tune based on what you've given it in the past in its own individual chat strings. So it is learning in that way. The issue there when I say you and chatting is you're working at human scale. These things have gigabytes upon gigabytes upon gigabytes upon gigabytes of text fed into them to train them. That is so much more than we could possibly intake in a lifetime. My couple of hundred chats a week aren't going to change it all that much. So what's holding a Thermo back from building their own? I mean, it's the time and the effort and the expense involved in creating their own. What's holding Thermo back from customizing and creating specific use cases, even baked into enterprise applications for a ChatGPT, for OpenAI's tech? Absolutely nothing. That accessibility and that availability is part of what makes them so special.
Perfect.
So the very last thing here, as we look at what these are actually doing, is how a machine would actually read the email I just showed you. What we did here is we ran this through effectively the opposite of ChatGPT. This is an algorithm called Glitter. It's from IBM and Harvard. This is looking for the most expected next word or most expected next piece of language in that email. Green means this is exactly what you would expect to see if you took basically the entire web and took like the average, right? This is the predicted next word. All green means you're getting back straight up average. It's exactly what you would expect to see. This is what ChatGPT is actually giving you and actually delivering. It's trying to predict based on an incredible amount of language that's been fed what the expected next thing is. This is why it feels so human to us. This is why the results generally make you go, well, geez, like that's exactly what I would have expected. Statistically, it is exactly what you would have expected. Now, a human can't write like this. Fundamentally, you can't. I could give you this tool and you could play with it. You could not replicate this amount of green that's in here because we don't work this way. We make mistakes, right? We bring bias. We do things that are out of the norm. ChatGPT doesn't. But if we take this as a canvas and we customize it using our human brains, we're able to do some really special things the way folks like David have.
So that is also why they are able now to check. So check the kids, for example, who are going to maybe use it for their coursework or for their, their writing. I don't know what you call it in the US. That's what that checker algorithm does now. It just sees how much green it is because a human won't be that green.
Exactly. It is okay. Night and day. It's almost a different language when you really dive into it and read them. We cannot replicate what it does, but it gets us to a point of, mostly good enough. Let's customize, edit, tweak, save ourselves a lot of time so we can spend time at the beach rather than using that hour over and over again as a human.
So we will come back to that in terms of how we can check if it was written by an AI and actually whether it matters. But David, it would be nice to see some pictures with this.
Sure, everyone likes pretty pictures, right?
Yeah.
It's also interesting what you're saying about that green. I haven't actually seen that diagram, but it also kind of explains why a lot of AI text, it's like it kind of sounds like AI text. Like people don't really write like that, and so that's a big part of it. You can produce a lot of copy and then turn it into your voice, right? Mm-hmm. So that's a part of that extra 20-30% that you kind of need if you want to make it sound compelling. Cool. So yeah, I came to this this panel with some examples of ways that we've used AI. It's a lot of what we do is image based. We've been playing around with the text as well, and you'll even see that some of these examples are a mixture of both text and imagery. For us as a design agency, mostly, we're really we're excited about just the potential that these tools are offering us, right? So I'm not really a designer by trade, but all of a sudden I can create things that it would take me years and years of practice and training just to learn how to create this stuff. And even if it's not something that I'm necessarily going to use. So for example, there are a lot of projects where we're still going to hire like a really talented renderer or artist to create stuff. But now instead of me trying to explain what I want them to create, I can try to create something that at least gives them an initial idea of what we're looking for. And it really helps smooth out that process. So I guess I can start with the story, just because this actually got, I'm not going to read the whole story, but I'll show you guys what happened. So I was driving my kids to work in the morning. Sorry, I was driving my kids to school before I went to work, and we were sitting in the carpool line in the parking lot. So I wasn't driving down the street, but I basically said, "Hey guys, check this out," because we've been playing with imagery a lot, and I can show you some of the things we've done with imagery. But I basically the prompt was, I literally went into ChatGPT. I said, "Write a children's book about a monster that loses its best friend and finds meaning in nature." That was the theme for the book. And it just started typing it out. Like you literally see it typing as you're watching it. And I was just reading it. I kind of didn't know what it was going to say. So there's a little bit of nervousness there reading it in real time. But it actually wrote a really beautiful story, and the story has meaning behind it. And you almost feel for the characters. It's a little bit emotional. And it sounds like a children's book story. It gives examples, it creates different scenes and things that Max the monster was doing while he was in nature, trying to get over the loss of his best friend Daisy, who was a dragon. And so I ended up going into, let's see, let me hide these controls. So what I did was I went into Midjourney and I decided, well, let's actually try to create the character. So my first prompt was this, and I said, "Cartoon monster enjoying nature." And I'm like, well, that's not very, very cute and fuzzy to me. So the next prompt that I went with was, okay, let's try friendly blue-green monster sitting and contemplating in lush green nature on a stump by itself, right? And this is actually what came out. And so of these four, I actually thought this one was kind of cute, and he looked a little bit contemplative. So I actually created 4 variations of him, and that came out to this. And then
so how do you do that? Do you like pick it and say, this is what I want, but you're on the right track, but tweak this?
Yeah, so I'll actually show you specifically as I go into the next example, but you can either choose one of the 4 to further render that out, or you can tell it to create a variation of one of the 4, or any of the 4 really, or you can just have it redo the whole prompt. But then basically of those 4, I ended up stumbling on this one, and this basically became Max, the blue monster. And so then I thought, well, let's try to create Daisy, because like we have Max and now we need Daisy. Daisy was a little bit harder because now the challenge was I had this tone for the monster, and the dragon needed to match the monster, right? And the challenge with dragons was everything was very scaly, but I wanted her to be pink. So right, I said friendly pink and purple dragon ready for an adventure, right? Because Daisy was the adventurer and she went on an adventure and didn't come back. But you can see it was like not quite the feeling that I was going for. But eventually I started getting closer and closer, and eventually landed on this one. And so that became Daisy, the best friend of Max. And if I put them together, you can see that you could see those 2 fitting together in a story. So now the biggest challenge that this faces, and this is a really big challenge with AI art in general, is now that I have these 2, getting them to interact with each other in a single image is really, really difficult. I don't actually know how to do it yet. I think it's possible. You just really have to learn prompts. There's ways to control the randomness, but if I put him into the AI, like you can upload a photo and have it try to create something, it's going to spit out something completely different looking. It's just that's one of the limitations at this point.
And do you own those now? Have you the copyright on Max and Daisy?
I don't technically own those. In theory, anybody could take my story, which is posted on LinkedIn. They could take these images. You can actually for the most part, access them. We do have a private channel because we have one of the higher paid levels of Midjourney, but technically it's all public. So there's a whole lot of debate right now about legality and copyright and around AI generated anything. I'm not an expert by any means, but one of the understandings that I have is this is public property, right? I could sell it and I could make money off of it, but so could anybody else. That being said, there is a line that does end up getting drawn. I don't know where it is and I don't know what it is, but if you can prove that there was a significant amount of human input that went into creating maybe some bigger experience, right, then there's potential that you could claim that as your intellectual property. But again, I don't know if that's final. I don't know where that line is, but technically anybody could take this and benefit from it. So this was, just so you can see, this was me trying to get the two monsters together, and like it was not obviously what I was going for. It's like starting to get a little bit closer to a pink dragon and a purple and a blue monster, but you know, a lot of work would go into actually doing that, and I didn't want to
scared the
spend the
kids.
time doing it. This was no longer a cute fuzzy monster, but okay. So that was one example, and you guys are welcome to go to my LinkedIn profile and read the story. But the other example that I wanted to show you, so like, let's make this more practical to science. So there's a few ways that you can use AI art. So like I said, you can try to create something in order to show it to a designer, right? If you have a hard time getting your vision across about what you're looking for, or the textures that you're trying to go for, you can try to create stuff in AI. Or you can literally just create images and use them on your website, whether it's a blog post or whether you're posting things on LinkedIn and you don't just want to use text for your post. You can create images to go with it. It stands out. It's a little bit more compelling, catches people's attention. So I wanted to create basically something like this. This is actually an image that I created. So I wanted to show you the process of going from, okay, I want to create something that looks like science and particles, and, you know, let's say my brand colors are blue and green. This is what I want to create. So I'll show you the process that I went through just to create this image. I basically said cloud of swirling green. So just so you know how you do it, you would type in, this is Discord, Midjourney. It runs through Discord, but you would type /imagine. And then as you start typing, now you see the prompt comes up and you can type in your prompt. So just, you know, AR-AR32, that's just telling you the dimensions of the image. So you can change the dimensions. There are different, I don't even know what you'd call those specifiers, whether it's dimensions or the amount of randomness. You can say, so this was actually the flyer that we kind of created for this panel that showed a bunch of cats. That was because we said, create a flyer for a ChatGPT webinar with 3 panelists. And the AI actually will interpret typos. And so it saw chat and probably interpreted it as cat. And so the next round, I actually did -- no cats. And that told it, don't put any cats in there. And it stopped giving us cats.
Which everyone was very disappointed about it.
I know, the cats.
Hashtag bring back the
kind
cats.
of made sense. Exactly. But anyway, so cloud of swirling green and blue particles on a white background, right? And this is what it came up with. So this was really not what I was going for. So I needed to evolve that a little bit. So then I said, swirling miniature green and blue orbs, right? Like I'm trying to describe what I'm looking for, but this is what it gave me. So I'm getting now more to round spheres as opposed to particles of dust, but clearly I'm not looking for glass globes. I'm looking for scientific looking particles. So then it evolved. I said cloud of swirling miniature green and blue orbs on white background. So now I'm going for miniature and I'm trying to get that swirl going. So again, not really what I was looking for, but the more I refined the prompt, the closer I started getting. So then I got to here and I was like, okay, these two are actually not bad. So I want to create variations of 3 and I want to create variations of 4, right? And then that shot out this, which was a variation of 3. And this, which was a variation of 4. And then I think so tilt shift was just another prompt that I've been seeing people use. So I'll show you something interesting. If you go into your profile, once you sign up, you get a profile and you can go into explore, and this is the community feed. And so this just, I don't know if it's random or if it's things that have gotten a lot of interest through the Discord channels, but you can really go through and see what other people are using to create their images. And this might not look anything like the images you're trying to create, But I like, okay, Samurai Winnie the Pooh. But so I noticed that there was this whole, like a few days where people were using this thing tilt shift, which is actually a type of photography that almost makes things look like they're in the distance in miniature models, but you can take pictures of cities. And so I figured I would just throw that into the prompt and see what it created. And, you know, it didn't do anything terribly fancy in terms of what I was trying to do, but I did say, okay, U1 means let's I don't know what U technically stands for, up, like let's up this, let's further render this one out and further render this one out. And then I just tried the prompts a couple of times again, and this was actually the one I ended up landing on. So I did variation of 3. There it is. There's now the larger version of the ones that I was calling out before. And then this was the one that I finally settled on. And that's how I got there. And then I tried one more and I just didn't feel like it was going in the right direction, but ended up doing that. So you can see how it's not a perfect system. You really have to learn how to communicate with it. I could further keep going with this. I could try to create it in different atmospheres. I could try to change the colors. One thing I noticed specifically about this one was like the texture of the particles was quite bumpy. And so I could play with it and try to get all the texture smooth. But it's interesting, I think, also to see this kind of, well, first of all, I think the technology is going to get a lot better, right? It's going to get a lot stronger and it's going to get a lot smarter. However, it's still not perfect, right? Like it's still going to come out. It's basically this, it works on a spectrum of randomness. And so if I take the same prompt and I redo it, so that's the other thing, I can just hit redo and it's just going to redo the prompt and throw out 4 completely different
And that's why
versions of
you
that
and I
same.
then, so if we were competitors and the 4 of us were selling microscopes, then we prompted, can you please like give me a really cool microscope for a webinar that I'm doing? If
Mhm.
we all run that, we'll get different outputs because it's just so random.
Yeah, that's why it's really, really difficult to create a series of images to an extent. I mean, there are things that we've created that are clearly of the same theme, but you know, if you wanted these exact particles in a completely different orientation, it would be difficult to do it. Or like the monster, right? Creating the same monster in a different setting, especially with another character that was also created, both looking the same in the same set, it becomes very difficult. But
could you make this into the SAMPS colors now for us? Make it orange and white.
Yeah, so let's see what would happen if we would just do that, copy, imagine, that opens the prompt, and then we're going to say solid orange and blue.
Sure,
And then
do blue. We've
enter.
only got.
All right, so while that runs, and it usually takes about a minute, and you'll actually see it as it's starting to render. You'll first see blurry versions, and then right. So that's just another example. So I wanted to, while that's running, we'll shift to.
So there are a few wee questions here as well. So like, in
sure.
terms of the legality of using this for commercial purposes, can you use ChatGPT? Can you use Midjourney? Can we do that right now and it's all fine?
Yeah. But again, so, and we'll tell this to clients, like we could use this art that we've created now to explore a potential rendering for your project, right? You could use this if you wanted to, but you're gonna have a lot less flexibility because it's going to be hard to create series of it. You can't manipulate this. You don't have like a rendering file and the blueprint to this design.
So like normally when you create a piece of art, you've got the, artwork in Photoshop, you've got all of the layers. And if someone comes and says, I'm going to I want to change this tiny or change a word, it's like, okay, no problem. Whereas if you had this, really, you'd need to take the whole thing and Photoshop it effectively. Although could you not just tell it?
You'd have to recreate it? Well, again, you could, but to get it to again, I could, if I took that monster and I put it in there, it's going to be really hard to create the same monster or just make a little change of the same monster, right? I'll show you in a second. Here's just so you can see these were the now blue and orange orbs.
Nice.
Right, so pretty close, but again, you can see the orientation is completely different. So I might have to play with this again. I don't think I could ever necessarily get back to exactly the image that I had selected before. It's going to be a very different orientation of that image, but similar for sure. One thing that you can do with it is, let's go back to my home. You can put in a photo and then have it make, actually, I'll show you this. So this was, okay, well, how can we take stock photography and make it more our brand, right? Now, these are not necessarily scientific looking, but this was an image that we had on an old blog post of ours. And we wanted to see like, okay, well, this is the image. How can we make this more with like our neon green? We're starting to throw some purple into our brand. And so I literally just put this through the prompt and I said neon green and purple, and it shot out this, right? Which is not the exact same image, but it's certainly a similar theme. And you get the idea, like if this was good enough for that blog post, this is probably good enough for that blog post, but now it's unique to our brand, right? Same thing with this. This was another image we had on a blog post, and I was able to create this, right? So you could do different variations of it. It took me a few tries to get that. It was sometimes adding weird things into the mountain. Like there was like a big boot made out of snow sitting on top of the mountain, which didn't make any sense. But eventually I was able to settle on something that actually looked kind of cool and worked with our brand.
So the guys are sort of wondering, like, should we use this right now? So if we can't iterate, does that mean we shouldn't, or are we just saying that it depends on really your purpose?
Depends
If you want to make a logo, you probably shouldn't. Maybe use it as prompts, as ideas, but you can't then just use the output as your logo because you can't iterate that. You can't make it into vector format. You can't. So what would you recommend?
So exactly what you said. It really depends on the purpose. So for logos, if you want to explore different colors and styles of logos, it actually, I've seen lots of logo outputs in it. But again, you're right. You don't have the vector file. You can't change that. It's going to be hard to, let's say you get one that it's pretty close and you kind of like it, but you just want to make little tweaks to it. You can't really just make those little tweaks.
That's perfect. That's what it's great for. Get it there. And then as Adam, you said, you're 80%. It sounds like you're even like 96% there. And then you're just doing the 4%. You still probably need a designer though. So it's not going to steal their jobs. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not, it's maybe one day, but we're definitely not there yet. And I think as fast as technology is evolving, we're still pretty far off from doing that. It can't touch what humans can do. It can do a lot of what humans can do, sometimes better and sometimes faster, but there are still limitations to it, right?
So I think there was one clarification in terms of using the monster to iterate for the dragon, but that wasn't really the case, was it? It was more just that you created the dragon with the image of the monster in your mind to try and soften it and try to match it yourself. So again, that was a human interaction rather than you being able to tell it, make it look like its friend.
Yeah, like create a pink dragon that looks like it could be in the same storybook as this blue monster.
But did you put in the blue monster? No, you didn't. You
not while I was trying to create the dragon.
Okay.
Only once I landed on the dragon, then I was trying to combine them, and you saw where the limitations were there as well.
And Adam, there is a sort of question for you on the ChatGPT in terms of, and it is sort of similar to what we're chatting about here about the images. Would it be better to really create ideas, create outlines, rather than having it spit out the actual body of text?
Yeah.
Is that what its use case is right now?
That is a tremendous use case. If you think about, go to like a list of blog posts, list of blog topics, there's only so many. There's maybe 10 or a dozen. What is, how much does X cost? Why would you use X and not Y? Right? We as humans can iterate them and make them special. We could theoretically take them from 9 to 10, make them more interesting, tweak them and tune them. ChatGPT in particular is going to be very good at understanding what those are because it's been trained again on gigabytes, bytes upon gigabytes of text. It's seen those 10 or 12 different ideas. So when you ask it for a list of ideas, it's going to spit you back something that is more than usable. If you ask it for an outline, it's going to understand a 3-paragraph outline, a 5-paragraph outline, a research paper outline, a blog post outline, a case study outline. It's seen enough. And think of it almost as giving you the mean, right? It's the basic, the average. So there's a wonderful use case there. And it's a great question, Dale. I love it to remove bias. So if I look at myself in particular, I have a very idiosyncratic writing style, which doesn't lend itself, for instance, to short emails very well. So I will often use it to remove myself and my style and give a vanilla, right?
Are you using ChatGPT to write emails to me?
Never you, of course not. but it's wonderful for that, because what you're getting back, think of it as a Snickers bar, right? It feels human. It feels kind of good. There's a little bit of dopamine. You're impressed because it was a robot. You don't want to think too much about what's in that Snickers bar or what it's actually doing to your body, but it's fine in the moment. It's going to give you fine in the moment. And then you can make that special if you want. Now, body text, to Dale's point, is fine in the moment okay? Well, sometimes yes, if you have a very simple answer to give. Are you trying to make it special and make people think that Laura is smart or Adam is smart? The answer is it's not going to do that for you. It's still going to be vanilla. It's still going to be milquetoast. It's still going to read like a robot put it together. That's where you really need it as purely a starting point, just something to jump off of, as opposed to something that's actually going to give you final product.
I've seen, sorry, Adam, I've seen a lot of people basically, if they're trying to give something to prompt it with, because you sort of need something, you're saying that you need to iterate after it gives you something, but you need to give it something initially as well. So what a lot of people have been maybe is typing in their topic into Google, and then Google obviously then prompts you with questions. If you hit read more, it will actually populate a load of questions on your topics. They're just taking that, copying it, pasting it in and saying, write a blog that covers, you know, some of these questions, or write 100 blogs that cover these questions. And suddenly you have so much content, but it is for Google as well. So it's good for SEO. And that, I mean, that is another question that we need to talk about is, can you use this for content? Will Google recognize it as legitimate content? Are they going to run the algorithm and say it's all green? Does it matter what's happening there when it comes to SEO?
Yeah. So if we pull the lens back on Google to its core stated purpose, it wants to connect users with the best possible answer as fast as possible. So there's a world where I would argue that ChatGPT is really no different than a screwdriver, right? It is a tool. If it is giving me the right answer as fast as possible, and I as a human can't improve on that or can't add any value to that, it's completely fine. If what I'm doing is spitting out infinite amounts of junk to populate it because content equals SEO, right, which is not true, that's not adding value. That will get your hand slapped. I truly believe that Google does not care whether ChatGPT wrote it, whether Bard wrote it, whether Adam wrote it. If it's right and it's fast and it's good for the user, they're going to be happy. Google makes a lot of money off of search ads. It makes that money from advertisers who come because they have users. They have users because the results are good. If you're giving it stuff that's going to be a good response, they're going to love you no matter how you put it together. If you're giving them garbage, they're not going to like you because their business model on the search side is based around not serving up garbage. So it's a tool. There are times when, look, if I ask it to define a simple concept and it gives me a good definition of a simple concept, okay, fine, whatever, no big deal. If I say, you know, what is oligonucleotide synthesis, and it gives me 250 words of crap with no understanding or context, that's not good.
Yeah, okay. And someone's asked as well about hallucinations. So examples where a falsehood was passed off as authoritative. I mean, I suppose we mentioned that a little bit when it came to the telescope, but are there other examples of that as well?
Oh, any number. The classic one is word problems, right? If you think about a math word problem, it's actually really complex. Even something as simple as, you know, the one I gave it the other day was 2 trains leave Boston, takes 2 hours to get to New York. How long does it take 4 trains? If you think about the mechanics behind that in your brain, it's weird because you have to take the concept that you're given, you have to break it down into its constituent language parts. You have to understand what they all mean, turn them into math, turn that back into constituent language parts, and turn that into a sentence. That's a very complex and a very advanced piece of work that our brain can do that a lot of other things can't. So when I asked ChatGPT that, 2 trains take 2 hours, how long do 4 trains take? It, of course, gave me 8, right? Because it said, okay, 2, 2, 4, 2, 8. It's going to take 8 hours, right? It has absolutely no idea that whether it's 4 trains, 2 trains, or 90 trains, a 2-hour trip is still a 2-hour trip, you know, Norfolk Southern aside. So it's going to fall flat in areas like that. And it's going to be very confident when it's wrong. Because again, all it's doing is picking the statistically most probable next thing to show up. You can correct it, but you're never going to adjust its thinking. You're never going to have it interpret a problem differently because it can't. It only has one modus operandi. Now you can tweak and you can tune and you can make results a little bit better, but it will pass things off as authoritative. The problem is, and this is again back to that 80% concept, you don't necessarily know what's right and what's wrong, what's real and what's not, unless you have an understanding of the subject matter, which you need as an editor, which is why right now in 2023, ChatGPT is not going to take your job. However, the guy who can do his job faster because he knows how to use ChatGPT, he might take your job.
So really what we're saying is you use it, log in, use it now, use the free version, use it to write your blogs because you're going to be able to churn out stuff quicker. It's going to be good for your SEO so long as you take the time to tweak it, make sure it's factually correct given with what you know. And then, but it will allow you to have more content. Google will be happy to see that content because there's more of it. And everyone really should be doing that now in scientific sales and marketing if they can. And feel free to use Midjourney to put an image associated with it because, you know, that's all fine as well.
Broadly speaking, yes. There are cares that you have to take. With ChatGPT on the tech side, is it plagiarism? Right, that's something you get asked a lot. The technical answer is no. If you run it through a plagiarism checker, usually it's not going to show up as plagiarism. Is it fundamentally different than what we all did in high school where we changed a few words and it wasn't plagiarism? Now you're getting into the ethical side of it, right? On the image generation side, have there been instances where what is generated was actually completely derivative, unknown to the user who was doing it? Yes, you have to be very careful with what you put out there. I always advocate that you check everything it gives you for factual accuracy and for originality, be it image, be it text. Because at the end of the day, what we're doing is we're feeding prompts into a black box. We're getting something back. This is deep learning, and we don't know how deep learning works, right? We can give it input, we can judge the output, but the way it makes its connections in the middle, we have no control over whatsoever. So there's certainly a level of care that needs to be taken. This isn't free content, right? This isn't your new intern or your new writer or your new designer who's cranking things at infinite scale. This is a human-like response to a repetitive task. It's human-like, it is not yet human. It cannot judge itself, and it doesn't necessarily know when it's making a mistake.
Chris is saying here as well that basically what the legality is right now is that if you do a reverse image search once you've created your lovely monster and see what else Google spits out, if you see that you've done something that looks too close to something, you need to use your own personal judgment and say, okay, I probably need to iterate here. Although, I mean, is this really any different than, you know, two people that are sitting down to write a song and end up spitting out something similar at the end? And Ed Sheeran is a culprit for this quite a bit. And, you know, is that just a coincidence? You know, that happens in other things as well.
There was also an interesting article I read recently where there are a group of artists, there's a class action lawsuit against some of the larger image generators. And the analysis in that article was that the way that they were describing how the image generators were essentially repurposing their work and creating new work based off of it was actually technically inaccurate. And so the writer of the article basically was under the impression the class action lawsuit wasn't going to succeed. But it still raises that question, right? Like two people could, in theory, both create pieces of art that look very similar. When you have an AI machine, when you have 100 million people on a monthly basis using an AI image generator, all based off of random activity, you're probably going to get things that look similar, both to things that already exist and to things that are also being created. It's a really, really fascinating legal subject right now, and I don't think anybody really knows what to do with it.
Yeah.
Kimberly, I can see your hand is up, but I actually can't pull you up. Maybe you can, Adam, but if not, just put your question into the Q&A or your comment and we'll definitely read it out. Robert from Up has said that they are actually using ChatGPT as well and the Midjourney for inspiration for tissue sessions. So are the ideas for creative work. So that's kind of what you were saying. You know, if you're not a designer, but you want to say, this is what I have in my brain, and then it's not final output though right now, that's not what they're using it for.
Depends what you're doing. I mean, we do use some of the images for different things, but mostly it's inspiration, knowing that a renderer or an artist is going to take that and make something usable out of it.
And that seems to be the consensus here on the chat, is that that's what people are using it for, that sort of prompt, rather than for the actual end work. So it sounds like from an image point of view, we still need our designers. And from a content point of view, we still need the content writers that know what they're writing about, but we can really speed up what they're doing by giving them a sort of head start.
Yep.
That's absolutely the case, right? I mean, these are not yet capable of producing finished work product, certainly in a scientific context that anyone should feel comfortable is the best possible representation of themselves as a brand or as an agency. The classic ones here are technical subject matter, current events. Most of the training, if not all the training here, is pre-2021. Certainly ideas, anything that's new and novel. By definition, this cannot create. And the fun one on the image side, if you ever want to look closely, look at the fingers. The fingers are always wrong because, I go back to context that's really difficult. This is weird, right? This probably shouldn't exist in nature and doesn't exist in nature in most cases. And there's 5 of them. The AI doesn't know that there's 5. It has no idea. It knows that there's these things that are at the end of the thing that's attached to the thing. Well, whether there's 5 or 6 or 7, it's creating it effectively at random in a really evolutionary process. So those deeper things, the little pieces that we innately understand, human has 5 fingers, these don't get, and they can't get unless they're told it, and they haven't yet been told it at the scale they need to function because they can't actually think and learn. That said, ideas for blog posts, sales emails, 100%. They're right there. They're going to get you almost to the end. They're going to get you to the point where you're editing and you're adding that human spark that makes things really special.
So to get people started then, ChatGPT, can we send maybe an email? We'll send an email out with a link just to say, get started here, click on it. Don't do it. What sort of time would you tell them to have a play around with? East Coast time? What time will it almost certainly be up?
It's gotten better. Outside of business hours, US time is almost always fine. You run into
and if it is done, what will happen? Will it just give you an error? Will it
it's just going to
hang on you?
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll do that. We'll send that email out. And in terms of Midjourney, David, is there a free version that I can create my own monster on just to get started?
Yeah. So the free version is basically you get 25 free prompts. And then once you've gone through 25 prompts, it would bump you up to a paid version. And then the way the paid versions work, the lower levels, you're in a public chat in Discord. So you have to have Discord, and then you also have to have a Midjourney account. The public feeds are actually kind of cool because you see what other people are doing also in real time. But when you do a prompt, it now has a bunch of other people's prompts below it, and everybody can see what you're doing. The highest level, which is I think like $60 a month or something like that, you actually can create your own private channel in Discord. And so nobody else is in there, and it's a lot more efficient if you're going to be doing it often.
And in terms of then, if we want to play around with it, my issue is that these prompts, I watched you do that. I even watched Adam do it, and they're not intuitive to me. You're not really, you say we're speaking to it like a human, but you're not really. So is there anywhere to like read what prompts to put in, or how would you get started on that?
Honestly, I would just start playing around with it. Like try it. Like one thing that works really well, and this just also is really great for entertaining your kids, is it's really good at spitting out creative looking cupcakes. Go figure. Really, really realistic. Like pick a theme, say, I don't know, scientific cupcakes, and it's gonna spit it. And like you can start to play around with like Pixar quality, hyper realistic, like different things. You can even tell it the type of camera to use and lighting if you understand photography. And that's why also the public feeds and that community showcase are really interesting, because you can see what other people are using to create images. And like it takes time. It's like any new language, you have to just kind of understand how it works and play around with it.
Kimberly's saying as a designer that her limitation is that there is no there's no image at the end for her to reconfigure. There's no source file, as we said.
Exactly. No source
so
file.
Once we have that, maybe things will be able to move forward. But until it's able to spit something out and divide it into layers that we can then manipulate, it's really not going to be so helpful. Lincoln mentioned stable diffusion. I'm not sure if that's language or imagery.
It's another image one.
Image one. Okay. He was saying that it's 100% free, but you need to run it on your own computer.
Yeah, there's a number of different ones, and some of them, like, they all kind of have their average style of image that they put out, and you can look at the comparative blog posts out there comparing the different ones. Some it's more the style, some are easier to create what you're looking for, but the style is a little more childish. Some are harder to do it, but you can really create anything, and then different price tiers as well.
So the first one of us that can go and make one of these specifically for the scientific role and send it out to everyone, that's the trick, really. And that I'll actually spit out a raw file as well, and it will understand the science, and then we're perfect.
I don't think
okay,
we're too far off, honestly. I think it'll be relatively soon. Like,
soon
this is clearly a limitation, and if there's a limitation, people are trying to solve it. So
we'll fix it. Perfect.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to add before we go and let everyone start downloading their AI and start writing their blog specs? Nope, just that they should get started now and start playing around. And it's really it is for everyone. It's not for you weird nerdy beta testers that, okay, fair enough, you were doing it 3 months ago and we weren't. We're now at the stage where it really should be everyone, and all of the marketing teams should be starting to play with this.
Get a head start. Absolutely.
It is 100% a must-have in your toolbox. But I would argue that critically, the must-have is the understanding of, number one, how it works, how it's putting things together, which is, it is not thinking outside a box, definitionally. It thinks inside a box. It's a big box, has a lot of stuff in the box, has a lot of neat connections within that box, well beyond human scale, but it's a box. And what you're getting is going to feel really good, right? The first time you put a prompt in and you get back a blog post or a list of topics or, schema markup for a web page, it's going to feel awesome. Read it closely though. Think about it and start looking at it critically and understand that it is statistical probability at work. It is not truly language. It is not truly human, if that makes sense. It feels human. It plays on our human desire for comfort and our human desire for predictability, but it's not as good as it seems at first blush. However, if you want to do a lot more, a lot faster, and get on the beach 3 hours before you were because you didn't have to do a lot of rote, repetitive work, well, you know what? That's what AI is fantastic for. That's where we are right now. It's pretty incredible that we're having this conversation in 2023.
There's quite a few people that are sending through links here in terms of different prompts that you can use. So I'll gather all that together and send it out as well, because we pretty much out of time. Sorry, David.
No, I was just saying, there was one question asking about Jasper versus ChatGPT. Just, I don't know, Adam, if you've used it. I was using Jasper for a while, and I was really having a hard time creating anything that actually felt usable. And as soon as I started using ChatGPT, it was like night and day. It was way more intuitive. You could have much more of a conversation with it. It would just do what you were asking it to do. Jasper, I found not so user-friendly. But
yeah, Jasper to me feels like the previous generation of tools that were a little bit more.
It was great 6 months ago. It was the only thing out there. It was brand new. Yeah, and I love Jasper. What I love about the OpenAI tools, though, is just how available they are. The fact that you can hook any app to it through Zapier without writing a line of code in about 5 minutes, that's a complete game changer. Anything running on GPT-3 or GPT 3.5, which is the modern iteration of the tech, is going to be really good. It's just how you want to interact with it is really the question. Jasper was also pretty expensive compared to ChatGPT, which currently is free. So
perfect. So we may have to redo this in a few months when, I don't know, the robots have taken us over, or maybe the robots will do it and we'll just attend and watch them. But
we'll watch them, exactly.
In the meantime, I think that is enough for us to go on, and I will go and download it myself because I actually haven't, and start using it for mine. So that's my lesson here. Thank you very much, guys. And I'm sure as well, we'll be able to send, we'll send all the information, we'll send the Zapier integration info, everything, and send the guys details as well, just in case. I'm sure you can see they're quite passionate about it. So I'm sure they'll be very happy to answer any questions that you have on it. And thanks everyone for joining us today. And yes, keep an eye on the SAMPS webpage as well for the future webinars that are coming up. See you later.
Great.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys. Bye. Appreciate it.